Denzel Boston could have a huge day against UCLA.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports is Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Lars, we got a really fun show coming at all the every day today. We're going to talk about some recruiting along the offensive line for the 2025 class. There's some good, some bad. We'll get into all that. We're talking about the defense, which really struggled last week against Penn State. See if they can rebound against a hot UCLA team, man. They've won 3 in a row. And we're going to get into Denzel Boston, who against a not great UCLA secondary could have a huge day. Quick reminder for all the everydayers out there, we really appreciate everything you've done sticking with us throughout the season. That hasn't gone the way that some Husky fans might have liked, but we appreciate it nonetheless. And please, if you like the stuff, please make sure you like, comment, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review for your audio only. It does really, really help us out a lot. We really appreciate it as well. So Lars, this UCLA secondary, it's allowing close to 253 yards per game through the air. And Denzel Boston hasn't scored a touchdown in almost a month. It feels like the stars are kind of aligning for him to have a huge day this Friday.
A huge day in which regard? Because I'm glad we're mentioning this because context matters, and you're absolutely right. UCLA has gotten torched when it comes to yards. Now, yards, as you said with Washington, they outgained 8 to 10 opponents or 7 to 10 opponents up until the USC game, and obviously the Penn State game was what it was, so they certainly did not outgain Penn State. But Washington had always had the yardage, but what do they not have? And what matters really at the end of the day, you could have 3 catches for 3 yards, but if you have 3 touchdowns, that's what matters more. The thing that stands out when I look at UCLA on the road, so because again, they're coming up to Seattle, whatever you want to call it. It's not a true Big Ten game in the sense that they're not going to Penn State, they're not going to Maryland, they're not going all the way 3 time zones east, or whatever you want to say. Have not allowed more than 1 passing touchdown since LSU in September. That is the key for me. Denzel could cook for 8. In reality, he should probably have 10 or 11 catches for 140, 150, Jackson Smith and Jigba Day shot, if you will. But the thing that matters most to me, and I know you'll talk about this later on, the touchdowns. I would rather have Denzel be 6 for 70 and 2 or 3 touchdowns than 8, 9, 10 for 140 or 150 and 1 touchdown or no touchdowns, because that's kind of where we've been. And if you look at Denzel, his last 3 games, granted 2 which are on the road at Indiana and Penn State, both top 5 teams, which just, again, we got to look back at the end of the season and say, hey, why did Washington struggle so much? You're playing the number 1 team in the country, the number 4 team in the country, and the number 5 team in the country on the road. Yeah. You're one of the big there's some context that matters in all of this. So as you mentioned, thank you to everybody for sticking around with us because it's not been ideal. But again, it's finding Denzel in the end zone. And one thing that we saw throughout fall camp and throughout spring was those alley-oop balls, those, red zone, find a way just to, have Denzel post up. And we've seen Will try and go to that, but it's been nowhere near what we thought. I mean, his biggest touchdown was against Rutgers, I think, arguably, in terms of, the catch and run. That was a catch and run. That wasn't a deep shot from Will. That was a 10-yard.
He had another deep shot like that against Northwestern as well.
Oh, but I'm saying since the Rutgers, Northwestern was before Rutgers, and Rutgers was at, So, but again, the fact that we're talking about that, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was back in September. That feels like 2021. That feels like a long time ago at this point. And so for me, yes, you can certainly attack UCLA with yardage. And I think Washington, this will be a game where they probably outgain their opponents in terms of total yards. I'm done caring about that stat. I'm caring about how many touchdowns you have at the end of the day. There's too many receiving weapons in this offense, led by Denzel, along with a couple of seniors, to only have 1 touchdown or no touchdowns through the air. It's criminal.
So I agree with you. I want to double down on that stat. Lars, the last time Washington threw a passing touchdown with either quarterback was against Iowa, and that was Damon Williams to Rashid Williams at the very end of that ball game, because they didn't have one against Indiana was next, where they scored twice on the ground. You obviously didn't score any touchdowns last week against Penn State, and then all 3 against USC also came on the ground. So this is something where it feels like Part of it is personnel. Part of it is game script. There are a lot of different things that have played into this, into all these factors that have contributed to where Washington is right now. But when I look at Denzel, when we saw him throughout the spring, throughout the fall, you and I came on this show and we said he looks like the best player on the field, which he did every single time. And there's certainly some level of debate that you can have of who's better, Jonah or Denzel, when you just talk about skill set and all that sort of stuff. But that's not where we are right now. That'd be a fun debate. Maybe it's an offseason thing. But when I look at this and I say, all right, first thing, you and I predicted that Denzel was gonna lead the Big Ten in touchdowns. Here's a really fun stat. Denzel has not scored a touchdown since that Iowa game. He just got caught this past weekend by Jeremiah Smith, who now also has 9 touchdowns, so they're tied to the conference lead. That's how good Denzel has been this season, and that's how much of a weapon he was, especially early on, for Jedd Fisch and the rest of this offense. But Lars, I think the thing that, when you look at those numbers and you say, all right, if he just got caught by Jeremiah Smith, that is, that's just how important he has been to this offense all season long. And I don't want to say that, Jedd Fisch is, hamstringing himself when you look at the numbers. Obviously, there are other factors that plays into this, where if you take out the USC game where he had 9 catches for 99 yards, he has 126 yards over the last 3 road games for Washington. And you can say, hey, why isn't Washington finding success? Maybe you're not utilizing your best receiver as much as you possibly can. And again, other factors, offensive line being a huge one in that. But it's one of those things where you have to find ways to get the ball into your best player's hands as often as you possibly can. And this is a perfect scenario for that, where, Lars, off the top of your head, do you know where UCLA ranks in terms of the Big Ten in rushing defense?
Top 9?
3. They are number 3. They are one of 3 teams that is not allowing 100 yards per game on the ground. We saw what they did last week against Caleb Johnson. That was really impressive. This is a really good run defense. So it feels like it would be in Jedd Fisch's best interest to go to the air early and often. And why not turn where you talk about, 10, 11 catches in a situation for Denzel, where it feels like that's well within the realm of possibilities. We saw it against USC, and it feels like that's something that can happen again on Friday.
Yeah, but again, this is kind of the enigma of the question, where it's out of their control. Like, what can Jedd's? It's why I asked him on Monday, when you look at the issues you guys have had, third downs, red zone, how are you going to fix that in 4 days? And Jedd basically said, great question. He didn't say that, but he's like, well, we'll do a deep dive in the offseason, and when we get to January and February, and, we'll really look at that. It's like, that's fantastic. I could care less about January and February right now.
Right.
It's a matter of what can you do against the Kaika Malloy's defense this week, but it's the matter of, I don't necessarily know. I mean, as you were saying that, and you said, how do you get your skill position, the best player of the ball in your hands? Jedd might need to call 6 to a dozen double passes where you line up Damon or Will on the outside, one of the 2 quarterbacks, and you just say, you know what? We need to create space and separation. Because here's the thing. It worked before. Yeah. It worked a couple of times before the season. And so, I know it's egregious, and I know it sounds like, oh, you're going gadget plays. It's like, look at this line. You need to buy yourself 3 or 4 seconds, and the only way to do that, logically, get the ball out to somebody else and then try a trick play. Because at this point, consistently, we haven't seen it. Now, again, UCLA is good, but they're not Penn State or Indiana. But at the same point, you don't think Akaika is going to have some extra juice and fire, given how he was, ushered out of Washington a couple of years ago? And again, no fault of Kalen. To be clear, Akaika did interview, all those sorts of things. I don't want to go too far deep into it, but it wasn't like Akaika left totally bitter. But you kind of have to wonder, you mentioned they have a great defense. Jedd said they have the best nose tackle in the conference or in the country, and it's like, yeah, great. So the pressure is coming. What is your plan going to be to fix that? And I'm kind of tongue in cheek about the 12 double passes, but it almost worked against Deck. The fact that you mentioned that Rashid Williams had the last touchdown catch, it would have been back-to-back with Decker, with Damon throwing both of them. And, and again, everybody wants to clamor for Damon. We're there with you, but, it's not happening. So, but again, that's how you use Damon more. That's how you do it right there. Get both quarterbacks on the field and figure it out.
Lars, I really like where you're going with that, but let's switch sides of the ball because Washington's defense needs to show up. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And just a heads up for all you everydayers out there, anybody who's invested in Thursday Night Football, I like the Commanders' money line in this game. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Jaden Daniels for Rookie of the Year, something we've been on all season long here on this here show. And a little parlay there. Give me Terry McLaurin's over in catches. Give me an anytime touchdown for him as well. And on the other side, I'll take an A.J. Brown anytime touchdown. That should be a really fun Thursday Night Football game. So, Lars, we saw Washington's defense have arguably its worst game of the season against Penn State, which, I mean, not surprising. It's a really good team that they have there, really good offense, and Andy Kotelnicki did a really, really good job with everything over there. But UCLA, they've been really hot for the next couple of weeks. For the last couple of weeks. This is a team where if you told us this a month ago, they were going to rip off like three, 4 straight wins coming into this game, I don't think either of us would have believed that. But that's where we are. And the question, Lars, is can Washington's defense rebound from last week and find a way to get right on a short week?
I mean, you would think they have the coaching to do it, but I also never would have seen a game that Steve Belichick's defense allowed 3 direct snap touchdowns in a row on the ground.
Yeah, that was an issue in multiple ways. Our buddy Alex Katzen, who joined us on the postgame show, he does a fantastic scouting report over at Huskies Wire for us every week. And one thing he put in there was every play except one coming into that game, when Tyler Warren was lined up as the quarterback, he and took a direct snap, he ran the ball every play except for one. So that was something where the film was there showing exactly what was going to happen.
Yeah, and here's the other thing. They also have had pretty good red zone defense in the past. Like, how many times this season have we talked about UW making a stand against USC, against Michigan, against X, you just go run down the list. I think it's 6 or 7 red zone. And I'm talking like within the 5, not just red zone, like within the 5, like at the goal line stands. And it wasn't even close. I mean, I do kind of wonder if Tyler Warren got in on one of those, because I'm like, how do you get blown back 3 yards but still make it over the goal line? I don't know. Either way. But the point being, it was like, okay, so there's that now pointed out. The other side of this equation, UCLA's put up points on the road in these last 3 games. 35 at Rutgers, I believe. What was it? 27? Yeah, 27 at Nebraska, and then 20 at home against Iowa. The ones that matter to me are, now again, they put up 11 at Penn State. So do the average between 35, 27, and 11, because Washington is not 11. They're not Penn State, but they're also not Rutgers and the other and Nebraska. So for me, it's, well, what is Steve Belichick going to do? You talk about, does Zach Durfee come back and play? Potentially, maybe not. I don't know. But that's, again, and that's what kind of makes this really interesting has been some of the usage where Russell Davis has, gotten back healthy and coming more. We have seen a little bit more Lance Holtzclaw, but not as much as I would have thought. Jaden Wayne got in before some of those guys as well. And so there's no knocking any of those players, but it's just like when you talk about rebounding on defense, it's, well, much like Jen on offense, are you trying to lay the foundation and just get a bunch of guys, experiencing, hey, Jaden Wayne has whiteout experience. All these guys now have whiteout experience. Or are you saying, hey, look, we are trying to just flat out win this game? And not that you can't win this game with those guys, but you kind of scheme seems to indicate, okay, are we going to actually try and build this thing, or are we going to try and go for it? Because this is the win you need. This is the one game. This is your bowl game. This is your bowl game to make the playoffs, basically.
So I like where you're going with that. I see what you mean. I think that in terms of the front, it's interesting because it's clearly not what you had planned on. Where you talk about Zach Durfee. Remember when we talked to Jen a couple of weeks ago when he's saying, yeah, he might play this week. The first thing he said was, you saw how impactful he was against the run. And there's one play in particular that I think of. It was against Rutgers when he ended up, I believe, re-injuring one of his toes, where he came around on a play where it just looked like it was a standard inside zone to Kyle Monungai. And he came around and just like wrapped him up and caught him. And there are plays like that where he's done a really good job of being able to just break down really quickly off the edge and get into the backfield and stop plays from behind. Where I don't, and this, with all due respect to all the guys in the room, I don't think there's one other guy who can make that play in particular. There are other guys who are fantastic in terms of making different plays. Deshaun Lynch is excellent at setting the edge. Jaden Wayne has certainly improved throughout the course of the season. Voigt Nufi has been a disruptor whenever he's in there on the interior. But you look at everybody else in that room, there hasn't been one guy who's shown that they can make that sort of play and collapse from the backside against the run and get there and wrap it up. And I'm not saying that they can't. I'm just saying we haven't seen that. So that's something that certainly has been really impactful throughout the season. But on top of that, the defensive tackle depth is something that clearly has been an issue after the Javon Parker injury. But it's something that, throughout the rest of the season, it's very clear that despite how we feel about Erlenius Davis and Bryce Butler, they haven't been in there as much as we expected them to be. Where we expected a much bigger rotation from both those guys. And for one reason or another, that's just not what we're seeing. So it's just kind of, you got to work with what you got at this point.
And then now you take, because again, you mentioned the rushing, and let's go to Ethan Garbers. My guy, scratch golfer, one time you look back at quarterback. So, and by the way, Ethan is a scratch golfer, believe it or not. Kind of blows my mind every time I say that, but he convinced me that he is a scratch golfer. So with that being said, what are you going to do about the secondary? Because Prysock,
I'm not concerned
for a minute about Prysock. You really did you?
Yeah.
That Penn State game did not look encouraging in the slides. And Jed mentioned the Leroy Bryant tackle where you had a chance to get off the field on third down in that fourth quarter. That is so. There's two problems.
I agree there.
I saw getting torched for 7 yards and not even being close for 7. There was like 4 or 5 times where I looked at Prysock and he was about 5+ yards away from making a tackle as the ball was coming in.
But
that's a problem.
But you're talking about tackling. But this is where you and I differ. Like the Leroy Bryant play, yeah, for sure. That's a play that needs to be made. Where I watched him come in, and I was like, oh yeah, all right, looks like that's gonna be a stop, and it wasn't. That's a problem. That's a play that needs to be made. I don't disagree with you there. But when you're talking about tackling versus coverage, for me, when I think about it, I think about this in terms of coverage, where Penn State ran very differently than what I expect UCLA to, especially from everything we've seen on film. Where when I think about Ephesians Prysock in coverage, I'm not concerned. I think one of the reasons that, he's a guy who can come back for next season. That's somebody who I think is going to take some steps forward. I think he can add some extra weight to his frame and be somebody who turns into a legit player. He's been solid this season. I don't think he's been what you and I expect him to be, but it's nice when you have Thaddeus Dixon in there. That's another thing. Thaddeus Dixon played 5 snaps in that game. That's somebody who has, I think, been the best run defender. And with all due respect to the safeties who've been really good, I think Thaddeus Dixon has been the best run defender on the back end of the defense. He's been excellent in that role this season. So I think those are issues that you have to kind of make sure you take into account with this, where UCLA has been solid through the air, but it's nothing that wows me. Where Penn State, remember, this was a top 5 offense in the Big Ten coming into that game, especially. So it's not necessarily the same level of challenge. And again, they're playing well. But I think those are things that need to be taken into account.
No, you're not wrong. I'm not trying to bag on Prysock because, again, he's only allowed 1 touchdown this season. So I'm not saying he's been awful, but it was like every time you needed to make a play against Penn State, and that's the key for Washington, because it's the same against UCLA, where you're 3.5 point favorite, so you're not overwhelming favorites. You're not guaranteed to win the game by any stretch of the imagination. It's going to be those third down plays, where has UW struggled? What I asked Jed in the postgame, what I asked Jed back again on Monday, third down defense.
Yeah.
What has happened? Because it was 8 of 15, 8 of 16 against UCLA or USC and Indiana. And then Penn State just said, all right, we see your 8, and, we're basically going to go 8 of 8. And
it's
then
10 of 12. Don't include the last play of the game, right?
Right, but again, I stopped counting at 8 of 8 or 8 of 9. When they were 8 of 9, I was like, okay, I'm already penciling this in as a question post game, because this is a problem. And again, similarly with the offense, how do you change that in a week, especially against a team coming in with so much momentum like UCLA is? I have reservations.
I think those things are fair, but I think you have to take into account some of the reasons that it happened in that game, where Thad is the number one thing I point to and I say, yeah, that's going to be a problem. Where there were a couple of plays where for sure, Prysock in the run game was not what I expected it to be. That's not where it needs to be. That's probably a better way to say it. But in terms of what I think UCLA is going to provide, in terms of what they're going to want to come out and do from an offensive game plan perspective, it's not something that I'm going to look at and say, I'm concerned about what the secondary is going to do in that game. Where we came out, we saw a guy who, like, Lars, let's be real here, and it's still weird to talk about. I think Drew Aller is a potential first-round pick. whenever he decides to leave, he's got that level of upside. And this is not an excuse, but I'm saying that's the level of upside we have. And all due respect to Ethan Garbers, he's not going to be a first-round pick. I think he's a guy who could potentially play in the NFL, and he's got a long career ahead of him. But it's not that level of talent. We saw that from Drew at multiple points with some of the throws that he made, with the way he was able to, like the offensive line gave him all day, but with some of the different throws he made and the way he evaded pressure and the way he's able to move and get out of the pocket. There was a reason that he was as highly recruited as he was, and it's something where we saw that. We saw a good version of Drew Aller on Saturday.
And the one thing Drew and Ethan have in common, they can also run.
Yeah. That's going to be something I'm really curious to watch in this game. But Lars, we talked about the offensive line, how it gave Drew Aller time, and the offensive line plan for Washington as this class starts to put a bow on it is really interesting. Which we'll get to right after a message from our friends over at Game Time, because Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets, which is great news if you want to go check out the Husky game on Friday night, the senior night, blackout, everything that's going on. It's going to be great. There are going to be so many great deals available on Game Time because the Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. With all-in pricing, you can toggle this feature and it shows total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And with seat views, you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Lars, the offensive line, it's getting really interesting. We saw Zac Stascausky took another visit to Oregon over the weekend, and I have some thoughts there. But we got to talk about the plan, because Peter Langi, a 3-star offensive lineman from Archbishop Reardon, where he plays with 4-star wide receiver commit Chris Lawson, is coming up for an official visit this weekend. This is one that's been pushed back a couple of times. It seemed like he was going to take a visit over the summer. Canceled, was supposed to come for the USC game, I believe it was, but had to cancel the night before because he sustained a minor injury, I believe, in his team's game that day. So he rescheduled for the UCLA game. Now we know he's coming this weekend. And it feels like he is, especially if Zach flips, is becoming a major part of the plan up front.
And worth noting, he's always been in the plan. And I think that was kind of the intriguing part. And this is the double-edged sword of everyone's saying, how could you lose Stascausky? How could you do this and that? How could you lose in Oregon? It's like, well, you flipped them from Maryland.
Minnesota, yeah.
Minnesota, yeah. Let's run through all the M names in the Big Ten. How about that?
Yeah, right.
But you flipped them from one. And again, so it's more or less about, okay, but also you look at Langi, 6'5", 330, projects as an interior guy, could play tackle. I mean, 247 has been as an interior offensive lineman. So it's a matter of just kind of what is your plan on the level for, because here's the thing. We have to kind of consider two parts in this, where you're talking about the offensive line high school class for the 25 class in building for that.
Yeah.
Do you supplement that with the portal? Do you say, okay,
maybe one?
And I think that might be the solution, where if you look at the interior, you might want to have some more interior guys. And Peter Langi, if anything, could start out interior and put kick outside as he get, into the college body and grows in and things like that. His high school coach told me that NFL body and NFL potential. So you always like that. And it's a good sign that, of course, if anybody's going to know NFL bodies, it's going to be Brennan Carroll and Jed Fish. So those boxes are all checked. It's just a matter of, okay, why not push for him earlier? And again, maybe you could say, well, brother commits to Arizona, these sort of things, you take your time. And I think what kind of you look at the Stascausky to Langi comparison, I don't think you want to compare them because it's not fair, because
sure.
Stascausky out of nowhere rocketed up. And I wonder how much, and again, having worked for a recruiting service before, take it with a grain of salt. And I'm not saying Stascausky's not good. I'm not saying Stascausky's
He's
not
very
good.
talented, yeah.
But I'm saying when you see a guy jump from 600 to 200 and 200 to, top 50, it's like, okay, where does he end up? And then, we've seen this throughout time with, Landon Jackson ending up at LSU and going as a 5-star number one, ends up as a 4-star and 2-time transfer now. So, recruiting rankings are what they are, but I think it's a matter of getting the body types and positions more so than anything else, which is why I think Langi to Stascausky, it's a tackle to interior question more so than anything.
So there are a lot of different thoughts that I have here. So I'm trying to just make sure I organize them properly. Let's start with the Zac Stascausky thing. Getting him from Minnesota was awesome. That was a really great flip because it was exactly as you said, before this explosion, this identification of talent, where saying, hey, we really like you. We want to make sure you get over here. And then all of a sudden, once Washington said, hey, this is a guy we like and we got him, it felt like then that's when the 247s and the on threes took notice and like, oh, wait, this guy's really good. We should reevaluate him. And then from that point on, the rise just continues, right? Where, he gets the Michigan offer, he gets a Georgia offer, the Oregon offer. And being a kid from Oregon, like the thing that bugs me about it is Oregon has it felt like they just really took their time, and then it's, oh, well, I'm a priority now. And it's like, it felt like that could have been done a little bit differently from the Oregon coaching staff perspective. That's besides the point. That's just their recruiting strategy. It is what it is. But on top of that, getting Jack Schaefer, the kid from North Dakota, that was a huge win. I like that kid a lot. I think he's a prototypical tackle, and I think that getting him is something that can really, I don't want to say negate a potential loss of Stascausky, but it's something that really helps ease the blow because that kid can play. And I think he's a lot of fun. On top of that, let's get to Langi, where I've been a really huge fan of Langi since the offer, since the first time it seemed like he was going to come up here on a visit, because you watch his film, you look at his body type, and I'd be shocked if somebody said they saw somebody different than Jonas Avaiena, where this is somebody that developed under Brandon Carroll, played early for him at Arizona, very similar, recruit ranking, everything like that. The exact same, size in terms of listed 6'5", 330, somebody who came in early, played guard. I think he was a freshman All-American for him, and now he's kicked out to tackle. And now people are talking about him as a first-round pick. And I'm not saying that's the expectation for Langi. Obviously, those are unfair expectations for literally anybody. But at the same point in time, you look at what this offensive line recruiting strategy has been, what the development plan was at Arizona, and what the development plan has been this season. That's all really interesting to me because you talk about the interior and potentially taking a guy or two. I agree. Where it seems like Landon's going to slide back over to center next season, right? Where D'Angelo with everything like that, guard, he's got another year. Feels like he's going to take it, so he'll be there at left guard. You figure out left tackle, whether it be Maximus McCree, whether it be Kaylee Tafai, whether Soane Fasolo takes the jump, whether Justin Hilkema takes the jump, Davi Boyajian, whether one of those guys takes the jump. They're now all of a sudden, they're still young, and maybe you bring in another tackle just to help on the right side, whatever it is. You take another guy who you bring in to say, this is competition. We're going to figure this all out, which I can see happening. You can also take a guy and add to that interior competition, where I look at it next season and I say, all right, maybe you are taking Peter Langi, and you say, okay, we're going to try to slot you in because we're used to playing guys early, whatever. Or you look at these redshirt freshmen because they love these redshirt freshmen. That's something that cannot be discounted in this conversation at all. They absolutely love, and rightfully so, both Michael Watkins and Paki Finau. Where, Lars, would you be surprised if we look at the depth chart come week 1 next season, and that's what it is at right guard, Paki starting and Michael Watkins behind him?
No, and I was waiting for you to, I was like, hey, who are you going to have a right guard if you kick Landon over? And I was like, yeah, exactly. Perfect answer right there. And for people wondering, why are Paki and Michael Watkins not playing this season? I almost think they've seen what happened at left tackle. And it's like, yeah, we're not trying that this year.
But Brendan talked about the other day, though.
And you also have Enoch there, so they benefit from having a veteran in that position.
Right, but Brandon talked about it the other day with Paki specifically, where it looked like Michael Watkins might have suffered a minor injury in that in the fall showcase game that they did, but it also felt like it was something where it was going to be a bit more of a transition year for him compared to Paki, where Paki, the question was always, all right, is he going to be able to add and sustain weight? The answer to that question is yes, we know that. But when Brendan talked about him the other day, it was something where, because he was asked about him directly, and he said, yeah, I don't think we'd expect to see him outside of maybe a bowl game where we're just working with him. We want to make sure that he's still adding weight and able to retain his athleticism and everything like that. So it seems like moving forward, I still think that the plan, when you look at Paki, you hear about what anybody around the program has to say about him in particular. They love him. They think that he's going to be a star. So why not slow play it? And then all of a sudden next season, a lot like a very different, player up front. But remember how it was with Jackson Kirkland, where that freshman year, it was, okay, oh yeah, this is an interesting guy you like to take. And then all of a sudden, redshirt freshman year, he's starting at right guard. And then he kicks out the left tackle, and the rest is history. But it's the same thing where as a right guard in his redshirt freshman year, he was freshman All-American. And not setting those expectations for Paki, but that's just in another potential trajectory for him, I would say.
The player that comes to mind, again, not like for like comparison, but in that redshirt vein, Parker Brailsford. Parker did not play at all as a freshman, and I remember people, media people who I'm not going to name, like, how did you not play Parker last year? How did you not do that? It's like, well, Jesus, look who's in front of him. You don't have a reason to play a true freshman undersized center. No shot at Parker for that because dude can play. But undersized center, especially as a freshman, added a little bit more weight, still came into fall camp at 275, 280. But could
and then
play.
Just wins out at right guard,
exactly, and that's exactly what's going to happen to Paki. Where I don't know what he's going to be listed at. I'm not going to throw around a weight because I don't care. No offense, I just don't care. But I guarantee whatever he comes in at going into fall camp will not matter. He's going to end up winning that job. And I think Watkins ends up slotting in at center behind Landon, gets in a couple of games, and then that's why I think you might see some transfer stuff. Or, some kind of position switching when it comes to the backup left guard, right guard situation, because I think Watkins is a more natural center, can play guard, but I think that's why you want to go maybe add a portal guy or, see if any of those redshirt, I'm blanking on a few names right now, but some guys that could maybe fill in that role behind Paki. But it's almost like, wouldn't you want to have maybe an undervalued veteran just to kind of help Paki in that right guard role? Not like Enoch, where it's like, hey, we want somebody to come in and win the job. But it's like, hey, can we kind of just get somebody where it's like he's a sophomore, got a junior, got some game like a Shaker Kendall. You got game experience, you know what you're doing, but you understand the assignment of we want the other guy to win the job. So we need somebody else to kind of just buffer it out.
No, Lars, I really like where you're going with all that because I think that's a great way to look at it where there's going to be transfers along the offensive line coming in. 1, maybe 2. We'll see, but it doesn't mean that they're going to play like it was this past year where you needed guys that were going to play. So I really love where you're going with that. And as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all every day who's tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. And thank you so much for making Locked On Huskies your first listen today. Now for your second listen, check out the Locked On Big Ten podcast where our guy Craig Sheeman puts the Big Ten first. When everyone else overlooks it, you can find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever else you listen to your podcasts. And with that being said, if you like everything that we have to offer, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. So that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click the like button, click the little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comments section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Friday.